But I want to thank everyone for joining us today as we dive back into the world of PowerPoint and LeaderGuide Pro. We are into our third session. Again, I like to give everything names, so I called this the culmination. But that's, today we're hopefully wrapping up the majority of the items that LeaderGuide Pro and PowerPoint do together. I know we ended last session with towards the end of the replace functionality, and there were some items that weren't quite working, or weren't quite working the way they were supposed to be. And that's mainly because I'm showcasing a lot of different things that LeaderGuide Pro does at any given moment. I'm popping in and out of things. Sometimes I'm pushing more stuff into Word than normally would be happening, just because we're popping into this feature and turning on that feature. So just wanted to kind of reset, and we'll cover a few things. Well, one thing from the end of last session to kind of get us caught back up as we move through the remaining pieces today. But we are, just a high-level recap of the first two sessions. So in session one, we kind of talked about getting prepared, and there was a whole series of questions I kind of prompted you with in regards to, how are you handling items so that we know kind of how to go forward with which features we should be using. And I think, after this session's done, maybe what I'll do is start taking, each of those, we'll send out to you, each question, and, depending, which features kind of fall under each of those questions to better help you with this. But so we had the getting prepared, and then we actually talked about how the PowerPoint slide content block and the PowerPoint note content block worked, and then looked at how to go about building out facilitator guides from PowerPoint and how to build PowerPoints from a facilitator guide. So that's what we looked at in session one. In session two, and these are the items we actually got through, not everything that we tried to last time, but we looked at how to manage slide numbering, what's the difference between add and replace, how to create a table of contents when we bring in our PowerPoints, how do we go about adding just selective slides into a guidebook, how we go about adding multiple decks. We looked at updating slide numbering. And then we really finished at replacing how do we replace all the slides? So if you haven't been able to see both of these or, one or the other, there are recordings on the website, and I have sent out emails to everybody with the links to those. But today, we're going to actually start back off, and we're going to cover replacing all slides. I know it's where we ended last session, but because we're spending so much time in replacing replacing today, I want to just kind of kick that off again. So we're going to look at that. How do we go about replacing specific slides in our deck? The big thing we're going to cover today is restart by module. If you have that set up, how do we do the replace function on there? We're going to then look at what if you have to remove slides out of your facilitator guide because they've come out of a participant or out of your PowerPoint deck. And then we're going to be looking at how do we extract text and add blocks, which are features within on the ads, on the last dialog box that comes up, about keeping formatting from your PowerPoint into LeaderGuide Pro. We're going to look at a few of the options that really deal with some functionality if you're using our subject matter tool and authoring tool, AuthorTec. And then we'll finish it off with resize slide images. How do you go about doing that? So that's our big list of what we're trying to accomplish today. So unless there's any questions, let's kind of dig into this, and we can kind of jump in and see what all this is. So the first item is, again, it's a recap of where we ended last session, which is how do we go about replacing all our slides? And so if we were to look at this at high level, when we're on the LeaderGuide Pro ribbon, and to do the replace, just as a quick reminder, we're going into the controls section on the ribbon, and we'll see this live in a moment, but we're going to go into that control section, and we click on where it says replace. From there, we're going to get a big dialog box that shows you all the different special functionalities that you can do within LeaderGuide Pro. And the one that we're really looking at is in that top section, which is all the PowerPoints. It's our second option, which is about replacing. So that's where we select, and then there's a few dialog boxes, but we're going to end up, the final one is we're going to get to this replace, or to the PowerPoint files to import dialog box. And over in the transfer section, this is the big piece when it comes to replace. When you do an add, we can bring in our slides, we can bring in our notes, or we can bring them both in all at the same time. But when you do a replace, you can only replace your slides, or you can only replace your notes. You can do one at a time. So this is where those kind of understanding the content blocks that we talked about in session 1. So if we're replacing slides, LeaderGuide Pro is looking for the slide content block and really the style underneath it, and it will replace our slides, the slide images there. If we're replacing notes, it's looking for that notes content block, and it's going to replace notes there. So if you were bringing in replacing slides and replacing notes, you would run the replace twice. Once for your slides, once for your notes. So let's actually look at this look at this live and how we would go about doing this. And so I'm going to bring up our desktop. All right, so I've already got a sample guidebook built out. So it's got a series of, I think it's got 5 images in there, or 5 slides. So when I want to do that replace functionality, again, I'm on the ribbon. I'm going to come over into the controls section. I'm going to drop down special, and I'm going to choose replace. And we're going to get a series of dialog boxes that are prompting me, what are we bringing over? So in this case, we're going to be bringing over PowerPoints. So we're going to click yes, and I lost my cursor for a moment. Now, one of the things, so at the moment, I actually don't have well, I could actually do this. We'll do the PowerPoint deck I already have open. So I have the slide deck that I'm actually using to kind of showcase some of the stuff open right now. So we'll use this to do the replace. So I'll select this, select this deck, and I'll click OK. And now on the dialog box that comes up, again, I can control the image quality, the image format over here on the left-hand side. But I'm going to, in this case, I'm going to just replace my slides, and I'm currently going to do all of them. So I'll select OK. Select the slides to be replaced. Is this correct? I'll say yes, because I want them to go into column 2. It's going to run through. Now, in this case, I only have got 5 slide blocks, but in my PowerPoint deck, there's actually 38 slides. It's only going to replace the ones that they have the slide content blocks on. So it's not going to bring over all those additional slides that are in there. It's just going to bring through slides 1 through 5 because it matches up my PowerPoint deck, right? So it matches up the slide content block number, so slide 1, slide 2, slide 3, with the first slides that are in my PowerPoint, with the slide numbers or in the left-hand column of my PowerPoint deck itself. So that's the how we go about and do a replace for replace everything. Any questions on that? All right. So then let's dive in, and we're going to look at how do we go about replacing specific slides. This was one of those areas where I was having something went wrong last session. I tested it out this morning. It was working, so hopefully everything's still working. After I did that, I was doing some other things to get ready, so hopefully I didn't reset anything on here. All All right, so let's bring up, we're going to relaunch Word. I'll bring that up right now so we can see it. And I'm going to open up that same document I was in. All right, so let's say we're going to do a replace, we want to just replace a few slides or one slide or, specific ones out of the deck. So in this case, we'll replace slide 1. I'm just going to have, just so you see, I've opened up a separate PowerPoint document, right? So I've got some different slides. And so when we want to do the selective replace, again, we're going underneath the LeaderGuide Pro ribbon. We're going to go under Special. We'll choose Replace. Are we replacing PowerPoints or Keynotes? We're doing PowerPoint, so I'm going to say yes for PowerPoint. Choose the PowerPoint deck I'm coming from. And, of course, the power of always doing these things live. So I'm just going to walk you through this because it's for whatever reason, even though it was working this morning, because we're live, it's now not working. When you want to do a selective program or selective replace, under the number section, you would come down, instead of having all, you won't have this issue. You will select, you'll mark selective, and then which opens up this pane down here. And actually, I have an image of this, so let me go over and let's go this. I can show it to you better this way. Wrong one. On here, so when you're on that selective, you're on that dialog box for PowerPoints to set up. Right now, we're showing you what replace all looks like. But if you do the selective one, you'll come through, you'll mark selective, which opens up that pane down at the bottom, and you'll then be able to go through and put in the numbers, and it will replace out those specific ones. And this morning I went through, I actually grabbed a screenshot this morning, like it was working, and of course, again, now it's not. But that, again, I was doing so much in my system, I'm not surprised something went a little haywire because I was turning on and turning off a whole bunch of features this morning. But this is how you go about and you replace selective slides. Hey everyone, it took a little bit and I've wanted to figure out what was going on, why I couldn't do selective slides, so selective slide replacement. And it comes to find out it wasn't that it was a technical issue, it was a user issue. So I wanted to show you why we were getting this error message, and then how we can avoid it, and how we can actually do this selective slide replacement. So let's take a look. I'm going to open up this document. What the issue was, it had to do with my slide numbering option. At the time, I had my slide numbering set to restart by module, right? So every module, the first slide number starts at 1. When I set this to sequential, I now have the ability to do the selective slide replacement. Restart by module is an all or one replacement option. I don't have the ability to do selective. I can replace all of them, and that's what I can do. But when I'm set as sequential, which I just set, I updated that in the preferences just prior to recording this. And if we go in and we look, this is actually one of those places where we're going to now, I've changed the way this document was originally created as restart by module. Here's where I will drop down the special. I'll come in, I'm going to reset my slide numbering, which will change it back to the document back to sequential, right? So when I change the preferences, this is what's saying going forward, all other documents are going to be set to sequential numbering. This document, though, was created with restart by module. So this is where I reset my slide numbering. It's going to run through, it will update that in this document. And now I can go under Special, choose Replace, right? I'm going to click Yes for the slide that I want to replace. We'll use this top deck. And now notice I can do Selective. And in this case, let's change over, slide 1. And I'm just going to change slide 1. I'm going to leave everything else alone. Double checking which slide, does this want to be, we're going to replace what's in column 2. Is this correct? I'm going to say yes. It will run through my document. And now notice slide 1 has been updated. And so the issue lay with the fact that, I had completely forgotten that restart by module is a strictly allows you to replace all. You can't do replace selective. You need to be set as sequential to reset by module. I'm sorry, not to replace a selective slide. So just a little heads up on my error and how you go about doing it. All right, we'll see y'all soon. Well, then we're just going to kind of move along.
Pat?
Oh, yes.
Sorry,
Sure.
this thing keeps muting. Does it replace the notes with the slides or just the pictures?
It just does the notes. So if you wanted to replace the slide, replace just the, if you wanted to replace the slides and then replace the notes, when you're on that dialog box, let's pull this back up. So when you're on this, PowerPoints to import dialog box, in the transfer section, whether you're replacing all your slides or doing, all your, whether you're doing a replace all or replace selective, in the transfer section, you're either going to, at one point, replace your slides, and then if you wanted to replace your notes, you would do notes only, and do a replace a second time to replace your notes. And that's looking for the PowerPoint notes content block, which will look like, in my guidebook, it's this section here.
Okay.
It would look for the notes PowerPoint, the notes block, and would bring that in.
Okay, great.
Now,
Thank you.
the one thing to keep in mind when you go that route, if you've gone in and you've taken your notes PowerPoint section, which we recommend doing, and breaking those notes out into actually deliverable content blocks, like the say block and the activity block. So we're driving actions for our facilitators with visual cues on specific items. Like we're going to say this, and we're going to then, show this slide, and we're going to play this video, and we're going to run this activity, and then we're going to make this key point. And we're broken our actual notes section of PowerPoint into those actions. Now that replace notes doesn't really, you're kind of removed from that because that notes block has now been changed over. You've taken it out and you've broken it out into those blocks.
There'll be a more manual cut and paste at that point.
Correct. And I think what you'll find is as you move along, as you use LeaderGuide Pro more, truly your slides will end up being strictly slides with not a lot of notes in them, or any notes, and all the actions you're doing are in your facilitator guides.
Okay.
So, but especially when you're first starting to move stuff over, we've already built out our items in Power. A lot of times it's built in PowerPoint, and we've got notes. But we want to, at the end of the day, we want our facilitators facilitating from our facilitator guide, because it's everything's right in front of them. Whether you're technical things happen, right? We're showcasing it again today, right? Maybe you lose the projector, well, or their computer goes down. Like, we still need to be able to facilitate it. So let's have it all in our guidebook. Now I only have to edit what's happening in one place, I mean, I'm still managing my slides elsewhere and bringing those in, but my notes are actually being managed in the guidebook. That's our recommendation.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, so that brings us to restart by module. So just as a reminder, what I mean by restart by module, and we're going to pop back over here into Word. So if we were to look at when you cut one of the preferences in LeaderGuide Pro, and we can get to preferences by going to the Parts section and then choosing LeaderGuide Pro Preferences. We've got some options when we're setting up. These are things we want to have happen every time a guidebook's created. Under slide numbering, we can do sequential, we can do absolute, or we can do restart by module. And again, you can get to all of these, the descriptions by clicking on the LeaderGuide Pro logo. And if you kind of scroll down in this text, it will give you all this. We also we talked about this in the first, I think it was the first session. But we kind of went through this. But if you've got it set by restart by module, and I actually have an example here already built out. It's like a cooking show here today. If I can find it. Restart by module. What this means is every time a new module starts, right? So I've got a module here that I called Star Wars because that's what my images look like. My slides start slide 1, slide 2, slide 3. Right, so I've got 3 slides in there. Now my next module in my guidebook, by restart by module, my slide numbering starts again. Slide 1, slide 2, slide 3, and so on. So basically, when you go this route, every module in your guidebook would be a new PowerPoint deck. I'm not saying you have to do this. I mean, there's some benefit to it. There's also, there's some downside. Just like everything, if choices we make determine how we kind of manage items. But when it comes to, how do we handle this in LeaderGuide Pro? There's kind of the replace, and it's handling how do we replace slides or update slides when we're set up by replace by module? We can't do a regular replace because again, every module starts slide 1 through whatever. So the process you need to do if you are set up by restart by module is we kind of, I'll walk you through everything, and we're going to showcase. We're going to go through most of these steps. I'm going to drop off a couple of the steps just for time purposes, but it will make sense. In this, first thing you're going to do is you're going to archive out, the slides that need to be replaced. So what this would look like. Let me come back over here to our desktop, and we'll kind of go through this as we walk through this process. All right, so when we want to archive out our slides, we would come over onto the ribbon in the module and lesson control, and let's get this a little bit bigger so you can see it. So in module and lesson control, the bottom right-hand button is the librarian function. So if we drop this down, what librarian allows us to do, and we've talked about, there's a few videos that are out here on this, but you can come down, if you drop down to this last choice, archive out modules or lessons. Think archive is the same as save. When we choose this, we're going to get a dialog box that is showing us on the left-hand side in this white box. It's showing us everything that's kind of in all the modules that are in my guidebook. So if it's indented all the way, or if it's all the way to the left, it's a module, and anything that's slightly indented to the right is the lessons that are underneath it. So I could choose, if I select, a module, so in this case, Star Wars, If I archive this out, it will archive out the module and all the lessons that are underneath it. So if I had multiple lessons, those would all be in there. I could also just archive out a lesson, but in terms of the replace functionality, we're doing it at the module, so you want to archive out your module. So I'll select the module I want. Where do I want to archive it? This is, if you're using the LeaderGuide Pro structure to save in, which we highly recommend doing, if you choose your local library, it's going to drop it there. If you choose your master library, it's going to put it in the master library. Or you could do it to both, but I'm going to do my local library. I'm going to click OK. You'll notice kind of at the bottom, it was showing it was saving. I get a dialog box prompting me to save. So I'm going to save that out. So that's the first step, right? We're going to archive out what's happening in our guidebook. Archive out the item that needs to be replaced. After that, the next step of what we need to do is we're going to go through and we need to open up that module that was archived, which we're going to do in a moment. And then if possible, if needed, we're going to reset your slide numbering. I'm just going to show you how we do that. In this case, we don't need to do it, but if you do, I'll show you how that happens. And then we're going to do the replace slides. So we're going to kind of look at these next 3 steps at this moment. All right, so let's come back here to our desktop. So after it's been archived out, so at this point I'm going to click OK, I'm actually going to click close to close this out. If I clicked OK, it would allow me to archive out other modules. But I'm going to click close. And now, if I come up to the start section, and this is one of the reasons why it's very helpful if you use our file structure to save one. If I click on open, it brings me directly into, in my case, it brings you directly into the your LeaderGuide Pro local library, which is where I chose to save my items. So I can come down, I archived out a facilitator module, so I'll go click on my facilitator modules folder. I'll click, I know I set up for 3 columns, but if it was 2 columns, it would be in the 2-column folder. But now I can find that file that I had archived out, which is here. You can see this, Star Wars that archived at 123. I can open this up, and now I've got this individual file to work with. So this is the module that I'm going to do my slide replacement in. So questions on this process so far? All right. So after that, we're going to need to do the slide replacement. So let me get the right PowerPoint file open. All right. So come back to the desktop. So in this case, I've got another series of slides set up. Here, let's get rid of those. So here's the slides that I want to actually replace the ones that were in there. So in this in this archive module now, if I needed to reset my slide numbering, in this case I don't need to, but where you may need to do it is if, let's say, your slide numbering in here wasn't in order, right? So it wasn't showing slide 1, slide 2, slide 3. This is where we would come up under Special, choose Reset Slide Numbering, which will then allow us to get everything back in order, slide 1 through however many in our guidebook. Our case, I don't, if I do it, it's not going to do anything for us in this because everything was in order. But now I can do the replace. So I'll choose replace. I'm going to choose which slides it's going to go into. or which deck. I'm going to put them into column 2. And I'm going to then bring those over. And now I've got my new slides that are in here. I would then just save this file. And then the last steps that what we end up doing in this are we would end up, with this saved, I can close this out. I don't need this PowerPoint open either, so let's close that out. Where did my cursor go? There. All right, and now what we'd end up doing in our facilitator guide, this is cursor placement matters in this place, in this where we'd want to put in our new, our updated module, right? Because basically when we do this restart by module, we basically have to take, extract that module out of the document, update it as an individual item, and then insert it back in. So what I would end up doing is I would come in, I would mark up my old mod, like the one that I'm taking out, I'd give it a precursor like old or something like that, just so I know this is the one that's going to end up being replaced. But then just figure out where I wanted the new one to go. And and for time purposes, I'm going to skip over the next, the final steps. But what we'd end up doing is we drop down, we're going to choose, instead of choosing insert under instead of choosing archive, we would choose insert. It would prompt us to go find that file. So again, if we use our structure, it's easy. It's in your LeaderGuide Pro Library Local. It was a module, so I'll choose archive module. And then I would choose what I wanted and click OK. And then it would go in and it would insert that into my document where my cursor was located. And again, for time purposes, I'm not going to go through that. We got, there's quite a bit more we want to cover today. And we do have some recordings on this the inserting modules and things like that about the librarian on the website. But that's the process for removing, our or replacing slides when you're set up by restart by module. So again, we're going to archive out the module that needs to be updated. We're going to then open up that module using the archive feature, using the librarian feature, or it's archived out using librarian, then we'll open it. If you needed to reset your slide numbering, you can do so. Now we're going to replace the slides. Then you got to insert them back into the guidebook. And lastly, you'd remove the old module, which you can do using the librarian function as well, and just choose delete module or lesson, and that's why we rename the one we're replacing with it old or replace or something like that. But that's the process for a replace, when you're replacing slides when it's restart by module. I know it seems like a lot more than what you would normally have to do when you're just doing the straight replace, but it's still it takes, again, it's a few more steps. So if you don't want those steps, maybe it's do we not have our PowerPoints broken up by module into our guidebooks? But if you do need to go that route, and there's many reasons why you may do that, using that replace portion is still a lot easier than going through and having to rebuild a guidebook fully rebuild a guidebook every time because of we've updated a module or updated slides in that PowerPoint deck. So if you're using it, and even if you have questions on that, we can meet individually and kind of go through all of these things. So let's jump into the next section, which is, let's say you had a PowerPoint deck and slides have been taken out right? You had 5 slides in your PowerPoint deck, and now you've kind of condensed it, and you're down to 4, or you're down to 3. How do you handle that? So this one's actually probably one of the simplest. There's really no main feature that you would do in your PowerPoint deck, and let's look at this. If we were going to be, let me pull up a deck so we have one again. All right, so if this was my deck, so we see it here. All right, so if, let's say in my example slide deck, slide 2 is being taken out, right? So it's been deleted out of your guidebook or out of your PowerPoint, right? It's no longer there. The way you'd manage it in your facilitator guide, you'd come over to your guidebook, wherever that was located, whatever that slide was. So let's say it was slide 2. All you end up to get the image out, all you need to do is on the ribbon in the text and table formatting section, bottom row, right-hand choice, it looks like a spreadsheet with a red circle with an X in it. If you hover your cursor over it, you'll see it says delete table row. But just put your cursor in the line that you want to get rid of. Click on that. It removes that PowerPoint, or removes the content block that you were in this case, the slide content block. So we've now removed it from our guidebook, right? So we only had, X amount of slides in our PowerPoint deck. We now have the same number of slides in our facilitator guide. There's one other step we need to go, though, and you can kind of see it here. So we've gone in, notice my slide, here's now slide 1. The slide I removed was slide 2, so the next one we're seeing is slide 3. To get our numbers back in line, this is where we come to the control section, click on the page with the exclamation point, which is update all fields. It runs through, this will repaginate our document, it rebuilds our table of contents, but it also sets our slide numbering back into a sequential order. So we have slide 1, now this is slide 2. If we scroll down in our document, we'd be into our other slides. So that's how we handle removing slides. So it's probably one of the simplest items when it comes to working with slides, or with PowerPoint slides and LeaderGuide Pro. All right. So now let's look at those were some of the main. Those are the big items, right? Between what we did session 1, session 2, and the first half here of session 3, that's going to 99% of everything you're going to do with LeaderGuide Pro falls into that. Now we're going to kind of showcase a few items that are there when you need them, but you may not use all the time. So let's jump in and let's look at a few of these. So the first one we're going to look at is extracting text and adding blocks. So these are some options that are available to you on that PowerPoints to import dialog box. Let me actually turn this on so we can actually see this in slide view. All right, so when we're at the dialog box about PowerPoint files to import, and we're choosing our image type and our image quality, there's an option, amazingly enough, in the options section where we can mark off to extract text, or we can mark off to add blocks. So what this does, and let me get my PowerPoint for this one set up. And this is why we, for me, showcasing these, sometimes there can be some items going on because I'm opening and closing for lots of different features. This is why that selective thing, unfortunately today, has started acting funny again. But let me get this one open. All right, so imagine, and it's not a hard imagine, when you get those PowerPoint decks from, from a subject matter expert, or, older decks that still have a lot of relevant information, but they have typed everything they possibly know on the slide itself. Or maybe it's set up where there's lots of text boxes, but the slide's very, hard to work. Maybe there's notes, maybe there's not, but there's lots of information on that slide deck that you want. The extract text function on that dialog box, what it allows us to do, and let's go through and actually do this. If we were to build out a guidebook, so I'm going to come to LeaderGuide Pro, I'm going to come in, we'll do both of these at the same time. Extract text and add blocks. And just so you don't have to do both of them at the same, you can do one or the other, but for time purposes, I'm going to showcase both of them together. So, I've gone it, you make all your choices of what we're building out. And so what we're seeing here, for those who haven't seen, I know most everyone here live has, but LeaderGuide Pro is grabbing all the templates that are part of the collection that we've selected and the choices we made on that dialog box. It was stitching them together. We're now getting prompted to save. But we're going to come up here in that moment. We get that proverbial fork in the road where it says, are you ready to add images to your document now? Which means, do you want to bring in your PowerPoints? So I'm going to say yes. Right? We make our choices about where we want to put our slides. I'm going to keep it all at the default at the moment. Right? I will choose the deck I want to bring in from. This is the dialog box that we talked about last session about how we can go about creating our table of contents. But this is the dialog box I wanted to get to. So when we're at this level and we choose extract text, what it will do, not only will it bring over whatever we have here as in our transfer section, right? So in my case, I'm only going to bring over slides because I know there's no notes section in there. But if I had notes, it would give me a content block for my slides. It would put my notes in the corresponding place, which in my case would be in a content block beneath. I currently don't have any, so it's not going to come over. But when I choose extract text, it would give me an additional content block underneath it, and anything that's in a text box on my slide, or anywhere on, it may not even be on the slide, it may kind of be in that outlying area around the slide, kind of that desktop you can use, it would bring those over and into my document. So that's what extract text does. What add blocks does is when we select this will allow us, in addition to whatever's coming over for slides and notes, in this case that extract text box as well, I could then come over and choose, on the left-hand side, here's all the different, instructor-led content blocks, or the virtual, or if you had custom ones. This is where we can kind of get into different content blocks that are available in LeaderGuide Pro, and I could then bring them over in whatever order that I needed. So like, let's say you had a process, like we always show a slide, and then we say something. So let me actually, so we show a slide, we then say something, right? Then we ask a question, and then we make a key point, right? Like, and again, more than likely this isn't an everyday, it's probably not every slide this is what happens, but if you had, let's say you were building something that did kind of have a really distinct process, that we always do this, and then we do this, and then we do this. Here's a nice way to kind of layer those blocks in all at once. So you select them on the left-hand side, use the right-hand box to add them over, and then you can move them up and down in the list to get them in order. Once you had everything the way you want it, you would just click OK. And then, so in our case, we're doing two things, right? We're extracting over our text, and then we're going to put in a whole series of content blocks underneath it. But I'll click OK. And so what we'll see what will have happened, right? We get action completed successfully when it's done. If I scroll down, right? So it brought in my slide. Right, so if we look at, let's go back to this slide. Let me pull this up so you can see it. So note, there was no notes, right? So I chose not to have the notes come over. But it took the paragraphs, you know, what was in the text boxes, and it has now brought that over into a separate content block beneath my slide, so that we don't have to rework all that material, right? I can, you know, I don't have to copy and paste it. I'm not retyping it. I can bring it in, and then I can start taking this and manipulating it into the different content blocks. So that's what that extract does. The add blocks, the second option of this, and again, they don't have to go together. I just put them together to kind of save time. You know, it brought in the slide, the notes, the extract block, whatever you had chosen in that transfer section, and then after that happened, it automatically, after each one of those, it put in our case, a slide block, a key point block, and a Q&A block based off of the, you know, the order I'd set it up under add blocks. This is very helpful. Let's say you're using LeaderGuide Pro to storyboard your e-learning, right? E-learning tends to be a little bit more systematic in how we do it. We're instructor-led or virtual instructor-led. Maybe we're showing a slide this time and asking a question, but then we're showing a slide and running an activity. So I would say if more than 80 to 90% is always the same, add blocks may make sense. But it does it for each one. So if it's only, 40% of the time we go this process, that means 60% of the time you're going to have to be coming in and removing blocks because you're not using them. But it's there as a functionality, and now I can come through, right? Just as an example, I could start taking my notes and getting those over into the different content blocks that were in there. And now I could quickly get a different look and feel for my guidebook, right? And maybe we even do the idea of these slides, that lots of great information, but there wasn't a lot of they weren't visually great slides, and not that the example that I made today is a great slide, but to kind of give you this example, right, I could come in and now do a replace after I've worked with all that text and made it functional in regards of a facilitator guide. I can now replace out my images, spend some time, make better visual images that would then replace over the text-heavy slides that were in my guidebook. And so now I could end up having something that looked more along these lines as I was building out my facilitator guide. So we could have something that looked along those lines versus having a text-heavy slide in my guidebook. So that's the functionality of extract text and the extract text and add blocks function. Any questions on that? All right, so the next item I wanted to look at is this idea of keep formatting. And again, so keep formatting is another one that falls into the area of, that the power. It's another one of the options that we can choose when we're importing our slides. So if we are looking again at our importing slides dialog box, the format section, this is again where it's available to you. It's not one I highly recommend people use a lot, and I will show you why that is. But it's there to be honest, it's there for the times you've got to build out training. Like someone gives you a PowerPoint deck and was like, hey, we need this immediately. Like I need a facilitator guide based off this PowerPoint, and I need it in like 5 minutes. Obviously, 5 minutes is a, probably not the best example or time, realistic time frame. But I am just getting my formatted text slide deck open. All right, so let's look at this now, building if we're going to bring in this formatted text. So we're going to come back, we're going to create a document. And at the moment, I'm just going to build a content part just to kind of save some time. When we choose under type and we choose a content part, we don't always have to build a facilitator guide or a participant guide. We can build a module, or a module and its lessons are just a lesson that can then be used, that librarian feature, to add back into our document. But I'm going to choose content part, which is going to just go through. I'm going to click no to build out a lesson. Prompts me to save the lesson, in this case in the facilitator lesson folder of my library local. But what we're going to be doing, so this will be a good reminder of the add function. So at the moment, I'm going to add in this PowerPoint deck. So we'll put it into column. So I am going to use my formatted text PowerPoint. Just move this through. So on here, if I choose format, what this does, and again, not one that we want to use all the time, but what it will allow us to do is it will bring over the notes section, and it will not strip away the formatting out of the notes section. So however it's formatted in the notes section is how it's coming into the facilitator guide, or into the participant guide, into the LeaderGuide Pro document. So what this looks like, if I say, I'm going to bring over my slides and my notes, keep the formatting on, I'll click OK. So when this is all done, as it brought in our, brought in our notes, notice it's kept this formatting on here. Now, the reason why we don't want to make this our default choice is that one of the things we're trying to do with the LeaderGuide Pro document is create a consistent look and feel. So if we look at this, the actual text that came over, if we go up into if you put your cursor into text in the LeaderGuide Pro document and look up into your text and table formatting, bottom left-hand side of that section, there's a styles box, and it will show you what the styles currently applied. Well, because I brought over the formatting from LeaderGuide Pro, this is no longer tied, or it's not tied to my style guide that LeaderGuide Pro uses to make sure that we're using the right font, the right size, spacing before and after, that you get to set up so that your collection, no matter who's building it, we get the same look and feel across all our documents. When we bring in with the formatting, it basically skips that step, and now subject matter expert A, who's put in the background, they've changed the text color on their notes section to be red, and it's Wingding's font. It's going to come in like that. Where if someone else is using it, coming in at 9 point, you're now going to have to manually go through. You can still use the LeaderGuide Pro buttons, right? If I want to make something a headline text and I want to make something body text, and I can use the buttons on the ribbon to apply the LeaderGuide Pro style, but you've lost all that automation. So that 30, 40, 50% of time that people spend on formatting, on things that aren't training related, when you mark formatting, you have to do it. So why do we put it in there? Because we understand there's times like you've got to get something out. You've got, very, very short time frame. It's formatted nicely. It's not tied to it won't be tied to your to your style guide, but you can go and you can work on it, and then you can build it out, and then after the fact, when you have some time, go in and make those changes. So now it is tied to your branding. But that's the formatting section. All right, we're on the last couple things, so let's talk about AuthorTec Functionality. This is also this is going to be it's also on that PowerPoint slides, or on the imports side of it. So I'm going to share this just so we can see it again. So AuthorTec Functionality, when we're on this PowerPoints to import dialog box, there's two things we can mark up, and again, we're going to talk about this at the highest level, because at the moment I don't think anyone's using this tool. I'll show it to you so you can see how it works. I'm not going to import stuff in, but I'll show you what it kind of does. So when we're on this dialog box, we can mark time tags, and then in the options section, notice there's a presenter only, participant only, or producer notes section. So when we are building in PowerPoint, let me get out of here. Actually, I've got an example. It's this one. Not that one. This one. All right. So in PowerPoint, our AuthorTec line of tools gives you our George add-in for PowerPoint. So what you'll see when you use if you were to use this, or your subject matter experts were to use this, on the ribbon in George, or in PowerPoint, you can get access to George, which is part of AuthorTec. What it allows us to do, it does several things, but one of the main items is we get to set who our target audience is for notes. The notes section in general to PowerPoint speaks to one audience, right? Just out of the box, here is who, I'm showing the slide, here's what I'm saying, or here's what's happening. And that's generally tied to one audience. What George allows us to do is we can go in and we can mark up our slides. It gives you a way to kind of put some meta tags for presenter only, participant only. We can also go through and say how much time do you want to have on a slide, right? So I could come in and say I want there to be, we're going to spend 5 minutes on this slide, and I could come in, and I could mark it so you could see that timing. You could have the timing show up if you wanted the timing to show up in the notes, or you want it to extract out to LeaderGuide Pro. Whatever the timing that's on the slide, when we go in and we choose to bring over time tags or producer notes, whatever ones we select, if we select presenter only, it's only going to bring over that presenter notes. If we select participant only, it's only going to bring over those notes. So this allows, again, it depends on your development process, but if you've got subject matter experts who are kind of building this out and they're like, well, this is stuff that the facilitator should be saying, or this is stuff the participants should be doing, if they're using this tool, they can mark up their PowerPoint that's then sent off to, the developer, and now the developer can easily just bring in those pieces that they need into their guidebook, or we spend 5 minutes on this or 4 minutes. You can do that, and again, that's all tied off of being able to, on this section of, on this dialog box to choose time tags, and then mark off presenter only, participant only, producer notes. So just wanted to let you know, here's something that's out there, depending on your build situation, that may make your life easier as well. Again, if you're kind of doing this on your own, this one probably is not one you're going to be using, but it's there if you need it. But again, you do need to have our AuthorTec for those two things to be functioning. All right, which will bring us to, and we're right at the 2 o'clock hour. And we're right at the last item I wanted to go over. Wrong one. Last one I wanted to go over, which is resizing slide images. Now this one you're probably going to be using a good bit more, or you could be using this one more than any of the other items. So let me pull, as this is going, I'm just opening up my last prepared document, and we can then showcase what this does. All right, so replacing or resizing slides. How this works. So here is my sample document, and on this one I had just to showcase this, I just brought in a 2-column, I just brought in a whole bunch of slide images, right? And so this is the slide images in a 2-column come in at 6.1 inches wide, which means if you had nothing else on there, which you're probably going to have other things, you basically get 2 slides per page. Now, maybe you want these images to be smaller or to be larger. Now, what you can do, again, and we're coming under special, we will drop this down, and we're actually going to come down into this more section, and we're going to choose the last option, which is, the second option from the top of the more section, which is resize and border images. So not only is it resize, but if you wanted to change up your border, you can do that as well. But notice what we can do is on this dialog box, we can resize our PowerPoint images. You can resize picture images. So these would be images that came in that are using the picture content block, which is one of the content blocks under instructor-led training. Or you could do both. In our case, we're just going to look at the PowerPoint images. Now we can resize all of them. We can do a selective range. You can also have the ability to go in and mark what that selective range is. But in our case, we're going to do all. And now how are we going to resize them? Are we going to do it off a percentage, right? Make it 75% smaller, or make it 75% of the size it is? Or you can do it as a fixed height or a fixed width, with the options of either doing it in inches or pixels. I really like to do my resizing based off a specific size, a specific image. Like, I want to resize it down to 4 inches or 5.5 inches versus a percentage, because percentages, what size is 75% of 6.1 inches? I can't do that in my head, but I can say I want it to be exactly 4.5 inches wide. Right, so if I do fixed width and 4.5 inches, I can keep track of exactly what that look and feel is. And whether you do fixed height or fixed width, we keep the aspect ratio locked. So if we change it to 4.5 inches wide, it will figure out the correct height, so it keeps the proper ratio. So you'd only have to choose one, either your height or your width, and then choose whether you're doing it pixels or inches. So we're going to do inches. If If I wanted to add a border, I can do so. But with that being done, I'm just going to select OK. And it will run through my entire document and automatically resize all the in this case, PowerPoint images that were, in my document, versus having to, right click and on each image and, click on size and position and mark it up this way, or, people grabbing the corners of their images and dragging them, which you end up, you're going to get an inconsistent look. You could have 1,000 PowerPoint slides, and in a matter of moments, just click on resize and resize images, and go through and get all of that done, with a mouse click. So that's that really is everything I wanted to go over in session 3. We're actually only 3 minutes over, which I actually find amazing. But as a reminder, we looked at how do you go about replacing all of the slides. Same process for selective, but instead of choosing the all radio button, you choose selective, and then you just match up your PowerPoint, the slide content block. So slide content block 3 with just make sure slide content or PowerPoint 3 in your deck would match up, or whichever one you're choosing, and it would change those over. And just whenever we do alls, I did forget to say this. Whenever we do a replace, it's a one-for-one replacement. So whatever was in that content block goes away, and this new slide comes in. So if there was slide and text, that text goes away in just your slide. We dove into that restart by module replacement and kind of went through that checklist of the steps you need to do. Again, why we kind of asked that question in the beginning, like, of getting prepared. Do you have multiple slide decks? And if you are, and you're managing that on a module basis, if you go that route, you need to make sure you're doing restart by module. If you don't want to go through that whole checklist because it's too much, all right, well, now we know we got to take all our slides and combine them down into one slide deck. We looked at the simplest process of removing slides. How do we go about doing that? And then we looked at some of the higher end, the features that you may not use a lot, other than the one we just did, resize slide images. Probably should have moved up in this list, so we could have said, the last 3, the extract text and add-on blocks, keep formatting options, and that AuthorTec functionality. I just want to make sure you were aware of how that these were capable, but it's not stuff that you necessarily want to use all the time. Any questions on any of these things today? All right, and of course now I just am seeing. All right, so one thing I do want to point out, we do have a session this coming Wednesday on using the Stream Deck, which is, well, you're seeing it upside down. I use it for virtual, for these virtual meetings, and it's how I go about changing screens and all that stuff with a few clicks. But I also use it for developing when it's time to create materials, for using doing stuff in PowerPoint and other things, working in in Windows itself. So we're gonna go into that. I sent out an email this morning with a registration link, or you can get it off the website. Next Monday, we're going to have the last LeaderGuide Pro user group of the year. We're calling it a holiday extravaganza to kind of set yourself up to give better training, the gift of better training in the coming year. So that's this coming Monday. And other than that, I hope this masterclass was beneficial. I'm not saying that all the features are going to be stuff that you use, but I want you to know what was out there and got a better understanding of how it worked. I am going to get this video put together. We'll get it uploaded, and then I'll get it off to you. So if you guys don't have any other questions, I hope you have a great week. Unfortunately, we're back to a full work week this week, but only a few more until the holiday season kicks off, or second part of the holiday season kicks off. So hope everyone has a great week, and I will talk to everyone soon. All right, take care, folks.